Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven.
Today we are joined by a very special guest.
I'm Lukas Litzsinger.
He is the lead designer of both Android Netrunner and Star Wars Destiny, two of my favorite games of all time. So
yeah, he really nailed it on the head for me.
That's right. We have him on today, and we are going to be talking about CCGs and LCGs. Well, what have you been up to this week? Either of you. Both of you.
This week, I got the old left stare. This week, we're recording this pretty early in the week, technically.
Like a week before it goes up.
Usually we only record it like a couple of days before it goes up. So there's not a lot of week to evaluate. We evaluated most of the week last week on the last episode. But I will say, and this is a very maybe bizarre thing to mention, is that Robert has been exploring the realm of mixed drinks for some time now.
He has. I've heard lots of things about this.
And there has been a grand innovation in that space that I feel like everybody should know about, and that is the addition of caster sugar into drinks instead of normal sugar. So it's actually designed to be used in like cold drinks and like these exact situations.
So there's a sugar that is made for cold drinks.
And it dissolves, right? Because normally you put the sugar in or honey or anything else, and it's like at the bottom of the drink, and there it is, right?
Yeah.
So it's meant to dissolve, especially into cold beverages. And he was making caipirinhas, which is the I think it's a Brazilian drink, if I'm not mistaken. Does anybody know? Colombian, Brazilian?
I'm not brushed up on my cocktail language.
But so it's incredible, and it's a rum. It's a certain rum, Cahacha or something.
Well,
Lucas is in.
now I'm interested.
So it's a rum that is made specifically from cane sugar.
Okay.
And then you add caster sugar and then lime juice.
Is it sweet?
Oh my gosh.
It sounds very sweet. There's like two types of sugar.
But it's not the kind of sweet. It's not that kind of sweet.
Is it like fresh fruit sweet?
It's just, it's so pleasing and easily drinkable. And
that all happened
that
past
was
day.
That happened yesterday, yes. So here we are.
That's notable.
That's the week. That's the important
I don't know a lot
part
about cocktails either, other than that things with rum in them I will usually enjoy.
You'd love it.
Actually had a nice one last night here in Tulsa.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was like called a 3-drop. I don't remember the place.
No, it was 3 dots and a
3 dots and a dash. 3 dots and a dash.
We went to Valkyrie because we had a little bit of weight before.
Oh, nice.
Before eating.
Yeah, that's a pretty hoity-toity place there.
Yeah.
3 drops and a dash. What was the dash of? Bitters, probably?
No, it was so you had a
pineapple.
Toothpick, and it had 3 cherries on it with a pineapple in the drink.
Oh, that's clever.
It looked good.
It was good.
I don't remember what mine was called, but my drink was good too.
Yeah, I don't remember what your drink was called.
They
I don't
don't
even remember
stuff.
what mine was, obviously. So.
What else were you up to this week?
So this week I was working.
Yep.
Up at Fantasy Flight Games, as I do.
On what?
I was also, different projects.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, exactly. I've also been getting kind of excited about Blade Runner 2049.
That looks awesome.
They released a trailer recently for that. And so Denis Villeneuve, who's the director, he also did Arrival, which I found to be fantastic.
We've actually talked about that on this very podcast.
Really?
Wait, that one?
The guy who did Arrival is doing
He's doing Blade
Runner
Runner 2049, which is exciting.
That's extremely
So I actually watched
exciting.
Sicario, which was his movie from 2015.
I also watched that somewhat recently last month.
And it's, I think, streaming online, so you can find it.
Yeah.
And that was pretty good, too. Not as good as Arrival.
Yeah,
But
Sicario
I'm still feeling really good about it.
It takes you right into the gut punch of reality, like immediately.
It does.
The gut punch of reality.
The beginning of that movie is just like intense.
Wow, here I am. So I didn't know. Well, that's good.
Very cool.
Speaking of, we see the Star Trek TV.
I haven't seen
happening?
the preview, but the reaction to the preview I have seen, and that's been off the chain.
Have people been positive about it?
Yeah, I haven't.
Good.
I haven't watched it. I just haven't.
Yeah.
So
you
you're,
only have time for reaction videos.
Yeah,
No,
watching people watch it.
It's not reaction videos, but you know how if you're on Twitter, and you don't know, if you're on Twitter and
What is this ancient technology?
You're scrolling through and it's there's the video, but then you can see the number of retweets and replies.
Okay.
Those are and it's here's what's trending, and it's a new Star Trek trailer, and then the responses are oh my god, it looks so good.
Good. It does look good.
So
Did
you think it looks good?
I've never been a Star Trek guy. Although I'm wanting to change that here pretty soon. I think it's worth doing.
For a long time when I was a kid, I'm obviously a Star Wars guy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize as a kid that Star Wars is really more fantasy than science fiction. Until as an adult, I watched some Star Trek Next Generation, and it was oh, this is science fiction.
Yeah.
This
I
is
get
very
it.
different.
Yeah, but as a kid, I could not stand Star Trek. because it was just, I was like, this is so boring, I don't get it. But
Where are my lightsabers?
yeah, where are the lightsabers? No, even in the original movies, there weren't that many lightsabers. But I have since gained an appreciation because it's very different. Like even the new Star Trek movies, I liked those before I watched TNG, and then it was like, I know why the fans are upset because you really got Star Trek in Star Wars mode in the new movies, and you didn't get what you actually like Star Trek.
Well, the director of the first Star Trek movie, J.J. Abrams,
ended up being
that's
Star
right.
Wars.
So, you know, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that does make
Yeah,
sense.
but anyways, I at least empathize now with their. It's sort of like getting the prequels for Star Wars, where it's just like, this is not what I signed up for. That's how the movies now feel. Now that I know what's going on.
Yeah, start movie versus TV show.
Yeah.
That's
Anyways,
fair.
so I've been getting ready for Destiny Weekend, which is what we're about to do. That's why Lucas is here in the first place, and that's really been it so far. I actually was very excited to see. I was working for a while on a draft format that we're using at Destiny Weekend, and the first draft happened last night, and there were some adjustments that needed to be made, but all in all, the people were having a fantastic time.
It's the Wild West.
And it's like one thing we did that you came in, you added, which was we were allowing people to bring. So you draft, and that's a whole different thing. We'll post online. But then you can also just randomly add to your deck the Journals of Ben Kenobi, R2D2, the Freighter. I don't know what it's called. It's Cargo Freighter, Smuggling Freighter, and Imperial Discipline.
Yeah, was it Discipline? I think so.
The one cost thing.
It's the red one.
Yeah, anyways, it's just hilarious because I walk in and everyone's got R2D2 on the board, and I'm like, mission accomplished.
Definitely a different format.
Why didn't you choose C-3PO?
Because he's actually really good.
He's so good. We kind of were choosing the cards that had been panned the most, basically, to see if we could get them on the table.
I mean, the reality
I'm a fan of the journal. I'm a fan of Obi's.
Well, in a sealed or draft format, both R2 and the Freighter and the journal, and even Imperial Discipline, I think is good either way. But specifically in a sealed and draft, R2 and the journals become way better.
Yeah.
Like
that melee damage on the journal can really make a big difference.
And it adds some consistency too.
Even just the card draw. Or having a die that you can like play manipulate on or remove for whatever reason.
Isn't really, if we get down to it, isn't Obi's journal ability basically just a better version of Leia's ability? Remove this die, get a reroll?
I don't think he can like
you can't say that.
That about Leia.
It's similar, right? Because like you can just draw the card and then use it to reroll, so you can reroll all your dice with that.
You could, however,
die.
One of the differences is that that card could then get discarded from your hand.
It could.
And
no
so
doubt.
One of the nice things about Leia's ability, even though it doesn't see a whole lot of use, is that you can reroll even if you're completely out of cards in your hand. And in addition, if you want to hold cards into your hand for something like Launch Bay, then you might not want to discard any cards from your hand in order to get a higher value.
It's fair. I get the idea, but Leia exists as she exists. So let's segue now to the main topic, which is CCGs and LCGs. First question I have for the two of you for this lot is: Are the games that get released as LCGs and CCGs inherently different?
Can I start this? Because we were talking about this extensively. I don't want to put you on the spot, Liz, because this is something that I find incredibly fascinating, which is that if you actually look at LCGs, like let's just take some LCGs for instance. Let's take, I won't do Netrunner because it's kind of a special game system. But if we were to take like, I don't know,
Thrones.
Conquest, Thrones, L5R.
Let's go with Thrones, it's the oldest.
Let's go with Thrones, right? So Thrones, if you take Thrones, and obviously it was a collectible game, take all of the distribution side of it out, whether it comes out in packs, boosters, whatever it is. Just take the game as for itself, then you take Destiny or Magic or anything else as itself. Like there's nothing different about those games fundamentally just because of the way they're distributed, right? You could make Magic technically, mechanically, you could make this game that functions this way into an LCG. You can make Destiny into an LCG, kind of, depending on the dice. And likewise, right? And then you could take Game of Thrones and make it into a collectible game.
It's literally been both.
The game systems, there's nothing different, I don't think, about how you approach a game system or what they look like. But if you think about an LCG, rather than releasing 120 cards all at once, you release them over the course of 6 months or something,
That would be
or 180 cards
packs,
or whatever it is. So it's really just about how soon and how big do you get the cards. Isn't that really all that it comes down to? Like, do you get them slowly over time, or do you get them all at once, all at once, all at once, all at once? Like, is there more to it than that? If you took an LCG Deluxe and Cycle, unboxed it all, put it in a booster box, and shipped it out, is it not essentially the exact same thing?
As a CCG?
Yeah. Rarity aside.
I think it's different. I mean, I
Tell
think
me.
you could easily take a game and change the distribution model, but like the game might lose something in the translation. I mean, Game of Thrones is an interesting one to bring up because like I played it when I was a collectible game and I played it when I was a living card game. And obviously at that time, living card games were something that was kind of new. Like we actually, Fantasy Flight developed the living card game model to actually take a Call of Cthulhu set that was no longer going to be collectible or couldn't be printed, and then release it still to the fans, kind of as a here's the end of the game. Thanks for supporting the game. We still want to get these cards out to you. And then it became very popular, and they're
Weird.
like, "Oh, we should just make more of these and just buy this pack and this pack and this pack and get everything." But like, I think it is so you certainly could do that, but I think the main reason why you don't see it go either way is that like there are a lot of market forces at work that allow a game to either be a collectible game or to be a living game. And so, even if you could technically do it, like it would potentially kill the game to convert it from one to the other.
Well, and I think that's really a great part of this discussion to have, which is why is it exactly that a game gets released as an LCG or a CCG, or why do you think so? And I think we all have opinions on this, but you mentioned some market forces. So like, I'm thinking about was it Call of Cthulhu? Is that what it was called? And then they switched.
Yep.
And so just from a like technical standpoint of production of a product, I know that the collectible model is expensive to actually produce because you have to randomly create, collate, package, distribute.
And rarity plays a big
The
impact.
whole
there, too,
rarity
yeah.
thing. And I know that like I remember back in the day talking to, when the Spoils was around, talking to them, and they were basically talking about, they had a problem early on where they printed the first set and it lasted too long, but not long enough.
Whoa.
It was in the pocket where you just don't want it to be.
Right.
Where if it sells out quick enough, you can reprint.
But if it
doesn't,
then you
you
don't
get to
really
a
want to
thing.
reprint because you have the next set coming down
But
the line.
then you have a period where like
There's no product.
there's no product.
Yeah.
And so they had this really, they had a lot of issues. But one among them is the difficulty in producing a randomly distributed collectible product is a different scale.
Right.
And I think that's what, with Cthulhu, you have a realization that you could release a product at a much smaller scale. They did the non-collectible, the non-random packs. People could get everything, and then all of a sudden, a bunch more people wanted to buy it.
Right.
And it was like, oh, this is
Interesting.
interesting. So not only do we have, there's tons of elements here to me, which is the literal like production, the way it works. It would work for some games and maybe not others. But then you also have the second thing, which is just the appetite of players, where there are players that potentially want to collect or want to play that kind of a game, and players that do not want to do that at all.
Absolutely.
So what else? What are the other reasons that a game may or may not end up in the format it ends?
What I'm sitting here thinking is like, what if is collectible synonymous with rarity, basically? Because we associate a lot of kind of traditional understandings of what a collectible game is. Rarity is one of them, but it's also, well, then we assume it's distributed in booster boxes. We assume that it's going to rotate out at some point. We assume that there's limited print runs of product. So I wonder how much of that you can actually strip off, because my favorite thing about a collectible game has nothing to do with collections. I actually despise having to collect anything and having to just like sit around. But what I love about collectible games is a shotgun blast of meta-changing stuff every 3 months, 4 months, right? Where there's this giant puzzle that is just, released into the wild, and you have sometimes weeks to solve the puzzle better than everybody else in the world.
Before a big tournament.
Before the big event happens, right? And you definitely do not get that experience with an LCG, right? Like, very rarely have I said to myself, I need to solve this brand new problem that an LCG pack has dropped on me. It's like, that card is better for my deck than the one that I was using. I'll put that in. That plot maybe changes the game a little bit, so I have to adapt to my deck here and there. But that kind of just wild, there's brand new characters, brand new possibilities, that journey, that exploration doesn't exist nearly as hard. So if I had a game that was releasing in that way, without rarity at all, like, I would take that in a heartbeat.
Like if you could have an LCG that put out a deluxe box with 6 packs every 4 months.
Every 4 months,
It's
boom.
just like,
I'd buy it right there. 180 cards, no matter what it is.
And, you know, perhaps if like there are enough people that feel that way, maybe we would eventually get a game that is kind of released in that.
Wouldn't that be?
Format.
It'd be a tough thing to
But
test, though, right?
It would be. Like that's the thing. It's a risk because like you're kind of, you know, just trying to take parts of both of the models that people like and then smash it together, and you may find something that works, or you may discover that it doesn't quite meet the needs of either one. And I think the point about like different markets is really important, and the different audiences for like a living card game versus like a collectible game is also important, because like there are some people who, you know, they've had that collectible experience and it's like they don't want to go through the collecting aspect of it, the trading aspect of it, the like kind of social negotiation aspect of it anymore. They're just like, I want all the cards and I just want to buy them and put them together in a deck and play them. And so, you know, living card game is really great for them. But on the other hand, there are people who do love the shotgun blast approach of just like, here's all these cards and figure it out. And holy cow, it's really exciting for a couple of weeks and the anticipation is building up to it. And for them, like collectible games are really the only way to get that right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I wonder too, because obviously you could mix and match these two formats as much as you want. I know you've mentioned before, like, there's a way you could do it that way where you release it every 4 months and you have all these cards come out. And you could also technically have like, you know, in every chapter pack for Thrones, there's a full bleed card.
Yeah, we had
one of the cards.
We had that dream,
bleed.
right? The card doesn't change, right? It's fully usable.
You're adding a little bit of a collectible.
Just like
aspect.
one out of every, let's say one out of every 100 chapter packs. There's a foil like Robb Stark, you know, in this pack. It's just like that maybe that would be something worth thinking about.
Yeah,
You know?
I was a big proponent. I wish they'd done that with the draft packs. Where it's like, if I'm having to buy a bunch of cards, and especially in an LCG, they have the like fixed draft packs. So it's like, if I'm gonna draft Thrones, it's like, at least, you know, throw some full bleeds in there that are random that I can be like, that I feel like are really, because, you know, one really good full bleed is probably worth the cost of that draft pack for me.
That's true.
And then I get the draft experience, and it's
absolutely true.
It's a cool thing. But so, are there any other reasons that a game would get released as a CCG or an LCG in particular? Right, you have the audience that you have to consider. You have the production bandwidth and all that. What was the first thing that we...
You know, CCG just takes so much investment up front. It is a risky enterprise. And it's risky for the players and the producer. Because anything that really just catastrophically goes wrong plummets all value for all people. You know? Like, we've been involved in games like this. Like, if you were in the 90s at all playing anything, it was like every week there was a new like 2,000 cards for sale for $0, right? Just please take these away. So there's a huge amount of risk, and I wonder if that does make a collectible format really only lend itself, at least right now, to games that you think would be popular enough to handle that kind of format, right? So like Star Wars is a great example. That's probably the safest collectible bet that you're going to be able to make.
In the world.
Yeah, right? Like, as opposed
and even
to...
that's not safe.
Absolutely. As opposed to, like, your own IP, if you're putting out some kind of a game that's collectible like that, you might not have enough people just to support that kind of an experience, so it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think there's other meta-level, like, CCG problems. And I know it's like the big production runs are a thing, but you also have the, like, reality of, for a collectible game to work, the audience has to be a certain size, because of how much you have to produce in the first place.
Yeah.
And so that also means, naturally, that only so many CCGs can actually exist. That was, you mentioned the 90s, which is what brought that up for me, which is, there was a new CCG coming out every month.
Yeah.
Or more. Like, it was, if there's a theme or something that's kind of popular, CCG's popping out.
Yeah.
And most of them failed, because, again, now, if you look, the number of just pure CCGs, it's like Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and Card Fight, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Vanguard.
Vanguard? Yeah, Vanguard.
Is, yeah.
It's like just, there's the ones that are left. Like Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Have been around forever.
That's kind of the trifecta.
But the reality is, like, I think part of that is only so many can actually exist and work.
At least given the population in the industry right now.
Yeah, you would need a massive explosion for there to be enough people buying these things. So really the main difference between a CCG and an LCG, right? They're both card games. And you have kind of weird exceptions like Destiny, which is a collectible kind of dice, kind of card game going on.
And you couldn't really have Destiny as like in a living format, just because like the price point would be way too high. And that's the other problem, I think, why you don't have somebody taking like a living game and just releasing a huge thing at once. Like now you're not paying like $15 for a pack, or you're not paying like $3 for a pack. You're paying like 50, 60, 70 plus dollars for a pack.
Yeah.
And anytime your price point goes higher, like it is harder to sell it to people, the consumer. It's harder to sell to distributors. It takes up probably more shelf space in the store. And so, like, there's all these other things that can potentially go wrong when you're trying to make that sort of risk or investment.
And I think that hits on, starts to touch on so many things to me that are different about LCGs and CCGs, right? So because it is a smaller risk, the buy-in's lower on an LCG typically, right? For a while until there's a bunch of product out.
That's the important piece, actually.
But when it comes to buy-in, that's obviously a difference in like the audience, and I think even the non-collectible on Cthulhu made it where more people could get in. And you've seen that where I think there's more people playing card games now than there were 10 years ago. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people can play non-collectible card games. Because I know people that would never have started with
never touch that.
A collectible anything.
You mean I got to buy a random booster box for $100 to get started maybe playing X, Y, or Z? It's like,
or you have people who did play collectible games and then they're kind of like never again. Swear off of them.
Yeah, it's like
and then they're looking for an alternative.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think people swear off CCGs?
I think people will swear off CCGs because over time, especially in a lot of games, the game does, unless you're one of those major games, like the game does die, and you feel like you invested all this, money and time and effort into a game that's no longer around, and you can't find anybody to play it, and it's not worth anything, and so like, it feels like you get burned or spurned a little bit by the game, or like the company running the game doesn't take good enough care of the game, or they start kind of mismanaging the game in some ways, whether it is through like tournaments or through like just the card design or
bases,
exactly, like who knows? There's all these things that can go wrong, and because you have a heavy investment in the game, at some point you're just like you've had enough, and you're like, I can't do this again. Like it's like, you just like close off your heart a little bit and just like harden it, and just be like, I will never love a game like that again. I can't do it.
It's kind of like how I stopped playing World of Warcraft back in my freshman year of college.
Good for you.
I played myself, which tells you how much like time you spend, and it was like 28 days, and I was like, nope. No, done.
That is a month of
close the account.
That
right?
does not count sleeping. Like that's 28 days of playing.
Yeah, right. So it'd be similar, where it's like you recognize I've spent all this time and all this money and all this investment, and what now is it worth if the game is no longer playable, has any value? And I think that's something worth mentioning about collectible games that is fascinating, is this idea that these cards are going to not only hold some kind of value, but potentially become more valuable over time, which I have never felt that way, obviously, about a chapter pack. I'll put it that way. Right?
That's actually a really important distinction, because I know that with LCGs, like Game of Thrones 1.0 was the worst victim of this, which is it went on from 2008 until like 2014, I think it was, or 15. I don't remember when it ended.
Was it that long?
Yeah.
It was a long time.
I think 2.0 came out fall of 2015.
Yeah.
So 1.0 lasted through the start of that year. Anyways, I remember when we first opened our store, it was like, literally, if you bought everything for Thrones at that point, because it was all legal, there was no rotation, it was just all on the table, assuming it's all in print. If you bought everything, it would be like $1,400. And it's just like, what's crazy about that decision, right? Because a CCG, if 3 sets are out, that could cost you, if you could spend $1,400 and not have everything on a CCG, very, very easily. But with Thrones, it's like when you buy a non-collectible card game, over time it wasn't $15 a month, for 8 years is not that big of a deal. But I remember there's one of our that's one of the advantages, right? Is the drip system. Like it's very easy to get in and stay in.
Right, the barrier of entry is very low, which is important.
Up at first.
But
anyways,
but
the problem this game got into was you need to spend $1,200 to get everything for Thrones. There's also an experience curve where you can play for months and not win a single game. Right? You spend $1,200 just to get railed. But then it's also, and one of the potential drawbacks, honestly, of an LCG is that once you buy a non-collectible product and open it, it is absolutely worth less.
Oh yeah,
Because
it's like driving a car off the lot.
As long as that product is still available on a shelf somewhere, there is a sealed version of it at MSRP. Yeah. So at best, you're going to get that out of it, at your best. But with a collectible game, I know if you'd bought a box of the first set of Pokemon and just did nothing with it, didn't even open it, like literally just sat it there, it's now worth thousands of dollars or more. And so if you open particular things, it does. And so CCGs have this, while they're usually a little harder to get into, they're also, I feel like, easier to get out of, as long as the game isn't dead.
And that's the risky proposition there. Like, you start collecting a collectible game and you think like, oh, I can get my money back. But like if everybody thinks that, and then everybody wants to get out at the same time,
It's like the
what
housing
happens-
market.
Exactly. Then like it would crash. Like sure, maybe a Black Lotus right now is $10,000, but what if everybody tomorrow decides they want to sell all their cards? Now it's worth nothing.
Absolutely, and I think
so it is very. It's kind of like you're playing the market. You're playing the odds a little bit.
But I do. I mean, it literally
humans.
have witnessed with Destiny, right? The first set sold out very quickly, and then you see online someone posts like, "Hey, I tried it out. Not really my thing. I decided against getting into collectible anything again."
Right.
And they're like, "I'm gonna sell it." And it's like within an hour, it's gone. And
Yeah.
so like the actual like risk factor on a game, when you can make as much, if not more, than you paid, if you don't like it, is actually a really big benefit, I think.
Yeah.
An upside and also a downside to a CCG. It's really interesting because I think about an LCG, and it's like you spend even $300 on an LCG. You're not getting $300 back if you don't like it.
That's true.
There's no...
That's true.
You hope you get 200 back.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like,
And
That's true, but I don't think that's something that's unique to like an LCG either, though. Like that is something that's pretty much, unique to all games except collectible games. Like I buy a board game, I open it up, like now it's worth less than the copy that's sitting on the shelf unless it happens to go out of print and then it becomes rare
print,
and
right.
so on and so forth.
and then it's
And so-
collectible.
there's speculation
And
there
it's somewhat
too.
collectible, right? So like a similar thing could happen with like a living card game, but what is true that usually when you buy a game, like you're hoping to get value out of it based on like how much time you play it, and like that's the thing that I think sets both like living card games, collectible card games, customizable games in general apart, is that like the return on the investment, even if it is like a high number value, is very good compared to a lot of other games and a lot of other entertainment
I would
options.
say a lot of activities in
a
general.
lot of activities in general.
Because I remember with the Star Wars TCG by Wizards way back in the day, that was around for about 3 years, and I spent a good amount of money on it. Like, and I still actually I have most of that stuff still.
Are they
I'm-
stuffed away in a closet or
Yeah,
something?
well, they're in a bin in the attic,
Okay,
but I'm
there you
I'm
go.
actually about to go through and like basically build like 7 or 8 decks back how we used to have them.
I actually
and
played
then-
some at Worlds, at Star Wars Worlds.
Yeah, and
Right,
then just
nice.
give the rest away. or
It was
throw
really
them away.
fun.
But anyways, with that game, play the heck out of it for 3 years. And
Obsessed over it, man. I mean, it was life.
just I mean it was at lunches, in between classes, after school, before school. It's what you did
Internet
at night on the
forums.
forums, right?
Right.
So it was it was the dream. But that game randomly, Wizards just like stopped talking about it. They went radio silent. Game ended. They stopped making it. That's a whole different story.
Yeah, out of
I'd say.
nowhere. It was very bizarre.
But even then, it was like I didn't feel like at the time that like I felt upset that they didn't communicate what had happened, but I didn't feel like I had wasted my money, right? And I think there are a lot of people that go into CCGs feeling like it's like it's literally like the housing market where it's like this is always going to be worth more. I'm not making a risky investment. I'm going to get to use it and play it, and if I don't want it, I can sell it. And then they're valuing their collection the whole time, right? And it's like, I have $2,800 of the Buffy CCG. And then all of a sudden, it's like the game falls out, it doesn't get printed again, and it's like, oh, now it's worth nothing.
Right.
So even though I may have played 500 hours of this game, which would cost you $3 or $4 an hour or $5 an hour to play it based on what you spent, it's like, and could still get countless hours out of it if I wanted it. They now just get frustrated because, like, in their mind, they just lost $2,800.
Right.
How much of that is just controlling one's own psychology, though, right? Because I was actually talking to my dad this morning about he was asking us questions about comic books and trading cards that he dealt in a ton when he was a kid and still does. Like it was one of his big hobbies. He was like, well, the thing that killed that market was you had all of these speculators enter, and they'd buy up all the original issues of anything that they thought was going to be hot, and they'd sit on them, and then they'd blow them out a couple of years later and make a decent bit of money. He said that's what totally killed it in those markets. And I was like, well, the fascinating thing about games is that they actually have no value whatsoever if nobody else is playing. That, you can have the one guy who wants to have Spider-Man 01, and he can just be the one guy who wants that for his collection. But you don't really want that Vader card or Luke card if you don't have at least somebody else to play the game with, because the value so much is in the experience of the game as opposed to the actual physical material that is happening. Like trading cards we were talking about the other day, insanity.
Like
baseball
cards?
cards,
Yeah.
you can't do anything with baseball cards. You look at them, collect them, and then look at them again. I mean, that's it. I mean,
It's literally like
Right, you flip it over, you're like, wait, what's his ability? Oh, he batted 322 last season? What does that mean?
Wait, I can
what
Google
do I do with that?
that's it, right? And so you have other collectible markets that have had issues for various reasons, but I think games are somewhat special in that the entire value of that game revolves around whether or not you can go play it. And the moment that you can't go play it somewhere, the value of the game and of the card goes away.
Well, do you think? Obviously, you have collectible markets, right? You have Beanie Babies. You both just laugh. You have.
Hey, no, I get Beanie Babies.
It's a real thing.
Man.
You have Beanie Babies. You have baseball cards. You have things that people collect because you have rare beers. You have rare cups. You have any number of collectible things. Is there inherent value of it? You're saying the only value is in the playing of the game, but in a CCG, is there not value in the collecting of it? Are there not people that the value that it's like, I'm just trying to collect all the stuff because I enjoy collecting?
I think there's personal value, like self-realization style value or identity value to it, but
I caught them all.
the important point being that the only reason that Black Lotus is $2,000 is because people are playing Magic. But if tomorrow nobody was playing Magic the Gathering, that card is not going to be worth nearly that. Like, you will still have a couple of the collectors that just want to do it.
I think because it's also played, you have collectors and players who want this rare thing, because especially and because they have the legacy format. Because I'm thinking about like first edition Charizard,
That's
Pokemon.
important. But that goes back to the playing, right? Because they have the legacy, they now have players looking for these cards.
But because these cards are very strong, they know the players want it, which is why those retain value.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Versus
but
something that's
I think about like
collectible.
first edition Charizard from Pokemon, not playable anymore, not tournament legal, not good enough to play, and it's probably I don't know the actual numbers on it, but I bet you it is similarly rare to like a Black Lotus, and it might sell for $1,500, $1,000. It's not going to sell for $10,000 though.
Yeah.
So that's actually very fascinating to me. Because even with Pokemon, like the Pokemon cards, there's literally a like nostalgic collector value because there are only so many first edition Charizards.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like
for sure.
there are kids that wanted it and didn't get it and are, at some point are willing to pay $1,500.
And I honestly wonder, even if it can't be played now, if Pokemon as a gaming franchise ended, if it would still have value. Because I think there's some kind of psychology going on that says this game is still a relevant and alive part of the, not industry, the landscape, if you will. And even though I can't play this Charizard, I still want to acquire it. It's a relevant thing in the sphere. But if Pokemon drops out completely, I don't know, man. I think that first edition Charizard loses a lot of value.
But I do know, like, there are people... Like, you look at Pokemon Go this past summer, and it's like, there's this idea
man. Yeah, I spent a week there, too.
Yeah,
I think most of us did,
couple days.
I'll tell you, I'm not going to segue into it, but I remember a day in, I was talking to Tim, and I was just like, I don't understand how this is going to last more than a month. And he was like, what do you mean? This is awesome. And I was like, I just feel like once you get to a certain point, there's just nothing to do. And he was like, and that's just exactly what happened. But
you don't want to catch your 74th Weedle?
No. I mean, there's a lot. There's not the catching. It's like the Pokemon for Game Boy is like the part of the game is the collecting, and that gets you through to the part of the game where like now you've like trained up and you're doing the real game. And then Pokemon Go didn't actually have a game. So, anyways, not to digress. We'll just have a Pokemon Go episode later. Just kidding. But I do think personally, I think there's value for certain people in the collecting. Like, just like people collect baseball cards or just like people collect, like right now I'm collecting decks of old games that I played. And it's a weird thing, but it's like, I just want to have my 7 or 8 Star Wars TCG decks. I can get rid of the rest. And I'm going to hold on to these.
And those aren't active games, so that's a good foil.
And then you can still have that experience. I like to do that too after a while. Like, I have like a bunch of cards sitting around, and then eventually I just go through, try to build like my favorite deck for each faction or something, or just like a good kind of cross-section of like the different play styles of the game. And then you can just like throw the rest in a box, get rid of it, because you're like, this is what I'm actually going to play to remember this game. Yeah, but there's no active scene to actually make me want to go back in and like change those decks or modify them.
And I think that's where like with me on the old decks, it's like, as long as I have multiple decks, I don't need anyone else specifically playing this game. I can show up and play it like a board game, right?
Exactly.
But there are literally people that just like collect baseball cards.
I know. Yeah.
So
I collected baseball cards as a kid.
He really collects baseball cards?
Oh my gosh.
I didn't know.
Baseball cards, posters. His big thing is autographs. If he has, so let me tell you this. My dad
People
is
do collect autographs.
a hilarious person.
He is.
He truly
Can we have him on the show?
well versed in his own eccentricity at this point and fully accepting of it, and not like, it's like, I realize that this is kind of insane what I do, but it's what I do, and I love it. And so he will actually watch like major league, like NFL football games, and then the two teams that are playing, he will pull all of the autograph cards from both teams' players that he owns, right? So if he owns like 5 players on this team and 3 players on this team, and he will set them out in front of the television while the game's going on.
Does he root for those players more because he has those cards?
Occasionally,
Maybe.
yeah. It sometimes that dictates if there's no real, dog in the fight, as it were. He'll be like, well, I have more players on this team, so I'm rooting for them.
I do know, and maybe this is part of the baseball card answer. My brother Daniel and John used to collect baseball cards when they were kids, and my brother Daniel was just like a wizard when it came to like remembering the prices.
Oh, nice.
You didn't like have it on a phone or anything. You had the Beckett books or whatever.
The Beckett book, of course. I remember that.
But one thing that they did, and I think this is the actual game that those people play, is the speculation. Because I remember he was just all about Jose Canseco, right? And it was like, I got 3 Jose Canseco rookie cards, and they're going to be worth so much money.
Yeah.
And then Jose Canseco did not pan out. So they are not worth a whole bunch of money. But I actually think with the collector baseball cards, that's a big part of it. Where it's like the new rookie, Frank Thomas
That's
was
fair.
a big deal.
Yeah,
and then he
okay.
just kind of ended up being mediocre. But it's sort of like, betting on stock, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't describe his career as mediocre.
He was good, but he's not.
good.
He's not like
good. See, that's a better word to use there.
Well, so he was. If you look at the card prices of Frank Thomas rookie cards, I'm sure they're not.
Maybe
off
the card
charts
prices
right now.
aren't
I'm not
good,
saying
but-
he's bad at baseball. He was obviously good at baseball. I had his
Sure,
shoes,
the card
the white and
itself,
black
though.
ones.
That's
Anyways,
right. Yeah.
I didn't
not
know
to
you were a baseball guy.
Not to
for
dog
a
on
while,
Frank
too.
Thomas. I wasn't a
Absolutely
baseball
not.
guy,
Okay.
but he had these awesome black and white shoes with
Nice.
stripes. Anyways, hard to explain.
Speaking of the
We're
people who
getting-
collect old Nike shoes, by the way.
I am a collector.
Do they wear those
I
shoes?
just
Do they
Zach
wear them?
realized I don't think they even
amidst
wear
this
them.
episode,
They don't even wear
I don't
them.
think
They
they
just-
even wear them.
just
Maybe
leave them in
special
the closet,
occasions. Maybe
you know?
special occasions. But yeah,
And
like
what are shoes made for
like
anyway?
my '96 Jordans,
Yeah.
limited run,
Well, you
whatever
can't wear
it is.
those.
Can I tell you while we're here, another collector story. So as a kid, I was a really big fan of Michael Jordan. And every year for my birthday, I would get the new Michael Jordans.
Yeah.
Right? And he had the 1s and the 2s and the 3s. And it was the 6s when I started getting them.
Yeah.
So I had the 6, the 7, the 8, the 9, the 10. And obviously my foot kept getting bigger. So they were different sizes. But I took religious care of my shoes. Like, making sure I'd play basketball in them or whatever, but then and they're basketball shoes, so they don't get that dirty. But then you clean them. And I got in trouble one time for how much I was cleaning my shoes. And then, that's a different story. What ended up happening is I went to college and I came back and my shoes were gone.
Oh, mom ditched the shoes.
She won't claim it. No one claims it yet. The shoes are gone. But I will say that if I still had the original shoes in the condition that I had them in, they would be worth a lot of money.
Oh man.
And just as a person who wanted to keep them, which is why I was keeping them so very nice and tidy, it was very upsetting.
That's
but I
entirely
realized on this episode that I'm a collector.
Yeah, well, I've been telling you that for a while, haven't I?
I think that the main drive behind collecting anything is kind of the treasure hunt mentality that goes into it. The fact that you could find something rare or exciting or something unique even that nobody else has or nobody else has like you, or you have a collection that is maybe one of a kind, which in something like a card game is a little bit harder to do. But if you're collecting shoes or Beanie Babies or baseball cards, you might have the only autographed version of a
Whatever it is.
Ken Griffey Jr. card from 1992.
I mean, I have a lot of my game cards signed by Star Wars people.
Right.
And it's
right, that's unique.
There's actually a theory here that is probably worth mentioning, and that is that, I think Jonathan originally said this, that the propensity basically to collect, especially in the U.S., is due to the fact that all of the genetics come from people who are willing to go out west and explore the frontier. And that is kind of the same mentality of discovery and the unknown that you get when you open a booster pack.
I think that's probably a big part of it for me, is that I know with LCGs, because I had a long history as a CCG/collectible player, whether it was Mom Pop Miniatures or Spoils or Star Wars or Pokemon or whatever. And then we played LCGs almost exclusively for a while, especially in the card game department. And going back to Destiny has made me realize a lot of the things about those old games that I really liked, which is, even with LCGs, right?
And that we didn't like.
And that we didn't like, yeah. But with the LCGs, it would be like, you just kind of know what's coming out, and you're never getting enough for it to really like just blow your mind on how to play this game. And so like you open a pack, and it's like, I hate spoilers.
Yeah.
I religiously hate spoilers. Even in X-Wing, it's like I'm trying not to see anything until we do the unboxing.
Yeah.
Because I love...
Because you reclaim that moment
of
discovery.
I love that moment of just opening it and like there was a card you mentioned earlier from the Spirit set that I have, and I was like, oh, what's that? Because I haven't seen that card yet, right?
Haven't explored the depths.
Right.
So, anyways, there's definitely a lot of elements there that are... I don't know if that's just my nostalgia talking because I played these things. What do you think that inherently... So you have like collectible shoes or all these random things, but let's get back to games for a second, which is...
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. Is there any harm by introducing collectability to tabletop?
Like, does it have unintended consequences?
Because there is the people that enjoy treasure hunting. There is the fact that it's potentially making this thing more valuable to people down the road, so it's easier to get out. There's the capacity, I think, just for bigger sets to be released and more cards to come out.
Sure. I mean, I think there's definitely, I wouldn't say there's harm, but I think there are pitfalls that you have to avoid. And one of the things that you see with like Magic early on is that it spawned a lot of kind of competitors and people who just tried to like recreate it because they felt like it was a way to make money. And so I think people can look at the collectible format and be like, oh, this is a great way to make money, without actually thinking about, is this the right way to release the game? And with something like Destiny, it's like, this is really the only way we could release the game. And so it's really exciting that's caught on and that we'll be able to continue to release the game. But just because you can make a game collectible doesn't mean that you should make a game collectible.
And when you say that, is it because of the dice?
I think for Destiny, it's mostly because of the dice, yes.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say you can't make collectible games without dice, because like that can certainly work too. But I think you have to be careful because like I used to play like the old like Decipher Lord of the Rings game.
Yeah.
And so like I'd get really into that game. I'd try to get all the cards. I'd actually order boxes online and then like sell them off to my friends to make a small profit so I'd get free packs. Like I was wheeling and dealing to try to like offset some of the costs of that. But
Sounds really familiar.
I wonder if anyone else has done that.
But check this here.
But one of the problems was that like in that game, like there were just as many like uncommons as there were rares.
I remember that.
Or just as many commons. And so it's like it's very unfriendly to collectors
like
and
50
to
commons,
players.
50
like,
uncommons, 50 rares.
Exactly. And or like 80 in a large set. And so, I think especially with Destiny, like we wanted to make sure that it was a little bit more friendly to both players and collectors, and that like, oh, we only have, 43 rares, but we still have 57 commons and things like that, where there are more of the cards that you get more of, which makes it, well, less likely to get a bunch of extra stuff that you don't need. And also it's a lot easier to potentially get a full set because you're not chasing that last like 3 or 4 rares that you open boxes and boxes and boxes and you just can never ever
there's
open
always
them.
those cards.
There's always those couple that you just can't get. And that was like one of the most frustrating parts of that game was those couple, even, uncommons or something that you couldn't get after a couple of boxes.
There was do you remember the ring that was in the water?
Yeah.
I was hunting,
from the 2 towers.
I was hunting for that ring.
That was a really good one.
For too long. Like, because it's like back in those days, I played that, and I think it was Star Wars TCG around the same time, and it'd be like you win like $30 for credit, and it's like I may as well spend on Lord of the Rings. I'm just gonna buy them on these packs to try to get that ring, and this is maybe 2002, 2003, so it's like like you can just go get what you want on the internet normally. But I remember buying far too many packs trying to get that ring and not getting it.
Right.
Still to this day.
Well, that's not true. I didn't get it back then, but actually Eric, one of my friends that I played the Star Wars LCG with, he had 2 of them. And randomly one time at Worlds, he was just like, hey, I have something for you, and he handed it to me. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Incredible.
So I was very excited about that. Should
we just go ahead and let's I think we're kind of at the point where we should coalesce these thoughts. And just let's talk about the benefits of an LCG and the benefits of a CCG.
All right.
Because I think the first thing you're talking about, let's talk about buy-in, right? Like that's the most obvious thing. So the buy-in on an LCG to me is like essentially an upward slope.
So it starts slow.
Start is super low,
It
super
actually
low,
starts
super
slow
low.
and keeps slow.
But then eventually, it keeps growing and keeps growing and keeps growing, and then all of a sudden, like you're at $200 to get all the packs caught up from your history, and then it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. Now you're 400, then you're at 800. Like, so it can get really extensive on the buy-in. So if you're early in an LCG, it is super cheap and it's super easy to get started. And I think that's a really important point.
And it's super easy to stay up.
Mm-hmm. And once you're there,
Yeah.
sustaining it is incredibly easy.
And that actually like both makes it easy to keep playing and also hard to leave.
It's very hard. It's very sticky, ultimately, for that reason. And then you have a CCG, so the buy-in is technically much bigger, right?
Yeah, I think most CCGs
Potentially.
you're gonna
Depends on how much you want to play it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking about a competitive level, it's definitely higher. But like, you'll also have people who play casually or just like pick up starters and a couple boosters and then like, play with their friends or family.
And so that's ultimately the great way to play that game.
That is a great way to play a lot of games. Yep.
If I could keep my friends from just buying more, that's the problem. Is there's always the one friend.
You always have the arms race where like somebody's like, we're just gonna buy like 10 packs, and you're like, cool, and they're like, why do you have that card? Oh, I bought 5 more packs.
Where'd you get that rocket launcher?
Yeah,
Right?
that's
Exactly.
right. I remember. I will never forget. My first CCG was Pokemon. Just to deluge for a second, Pokemon, and then me and my friend Will stopped playing Pokemon, and then the Dragon Ball Z TCG came out, and I was like, we're not gonna go full in on this one, right? We're just gonna buy some starters,
Right.
and that's it. And I bought some starters, and then like 2 weeks later, it was like the week after his birthday, I showed up, and we were playing, and I had my like starter Piccolo deck or whatever, and he had his deck, and he had just a bunch more cards, and I was like, what happened? And he was like, I got some more cards for my birthday, and I was like, all right, I'll get some more cards. So I went and I bought like $200 worth of cards. And then I came back and tromped him. He was just like, I'm not getting into this game seriously. And I was like, all right. And I just kept playing with way more cards. And eventually we both got really into that game. But that's how they get you.
Always how it happens. So there's buy-in there, and then, so the CCG, like you said, you can buy in somewhat. And that's a weird thing about the LCG too, is
You could do the same
with
thing.
an
LCG.
You could buy a
just
core
decide to
set.
get
You can always
you buy
accommodate.
a core set, or you just go with the deluxe boxes. Like for a while, I was really thinking about like, how would people play Netrunner with just out of the core sets and the deluxe boxes, and that's why we provide like deck lists and the deluxe boxes, so that if people just want a more casual experience without spending everything to buy all of the data packs or chapter packs or whatnot, they can still do that too.
And that's what I think is cool about the collectible format also, is that you can just jump in on the newest set and generally do pretty okay. Like if you don't have to necessarily collect the past 5 sets of a collectible game to have a deck that's usually reasonable out of just one set. Like I could build a Spirit deck right now that was as good or close to as good as an Awakenings plus Spirit deck.
I agree with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I
just lost the one earlier today. So.
Yeah, there you go.
I know we're in the process of making the list. One thing that the CCGs do, because of their value, is the fact that you can also buy individual cards
Singles,
from
yeah.
other players or from marketplaces or whatever. But I think singles, like you said, if you just bought a box of Spirit, you could do some trading and then just buy some cards off some people. And you can get the Awakening stuff that you want without buying a pack ever.
That's true. That's true. Trade players who had the old Awakening stuff for newer stuff.
Right, because a lot of those older players are going to be looking for the new stuff.
Yeah, I think technically that was 1.0 Throne's biggest problem, is that decks would have literally cards from 35 different packs.
Yeah.
Like, one of characters times 20. And it's like, to build this deck, you actually have to buy 30 packs.
Tough. Yeah.
Anyways,
Well, LCGs, there's no randomness.
there is no
Right?
randomness.
For a lot of people, that's a huge benefit. You know what you're getting. You don't have to chase anything. You don't have to trade with anybody. You don't have to mess around with all this collection nonsense.
You don't have to sort through your
You don't have
cards.
to, you don't have to do anything.
Already,
You just get the
also-
thing and you play.
There's no, that same issue, there's no, like, buying your way to a win, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
everyone has access to the exact same cards. Right now, we're about to have Destiny Weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone may or may not have a second Force Speed.
Palpatine,
Palpatine.
shows
Yep.
up, and nobody at your store has pulled Palpatine yet, and so all of a sudden you don't know what to do.
Sure.
This guy just comes in and wrecks. That's why I really was pushing for no TIE pilot with Palpatine in the draft. But apparently,
Hey,
it
there was
happened,
one.
and
it
it
lost.
didn't win.
And it lost.
It did not win. That's right.
I was certain that it would just run the table.
I was betting on it losing. Obviously, Palpatine TIE Pilot is
Good.
great.
It seems pretty good in draft.
Yeah, but draft's a wily place.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Apparently, there's a lot of common control cards in the set.
Yeah, well, that's the point of TIE pilot, right? can't control Palpatine anymore. So there's no randomness in LCG. Now in a collectible game, of course, there is a ton of randomness. And so the difference, the scales that you're weighing there, do you like the treasure hunting kind of thing? Do you like the collectible mindset? The pursuing this thing kind of its own sake, just to see if you can find all these cards? Like that has a lot of appeal to a lot of people.
Sure.
Pokemon Go, like you said, was a huge thing. Pokemon, the franchise, was a huge thing based simply on finding these
because
digital
you
creatures.
show up to school and it's like, oh, I caught this thing. Have you caught it yet? And it's like, oh my god, I gotta go find whatever.
And I will say, like, I'm a big fan of games that have smaller deck sizes. So like Destiny being at 30 cards is actually pretty nice. You need less cards. It's easier to collect as well because you only need 2 copies of each card, unlike like 4 copies of each card.
Sure.
Because like it's a lot easier to open one and be like, oh, I just got to trade for 1 more, and now I have my complete play set. Versus like 3 more. It's like, where am I going to, or like, especially if it's a super rare card, it just feels like really overwhelming. And so like other games I've played, it's like I'm the type of player who I want to try everything. I want to build everything. I want to have everything available because I like the customization that goes into it. I like the ability to kind of express kind of my identity in the deck that I play.
Yeah.
And so, living card games are very good at that because it's like I just know I have everything and I don't have to worry about, oh, I wanted to try out this deck or that deck, but I don't have these cards to try.
You always have it, yeah, true.
Yep. But also having 2 copies of a card in a deck is really nice because it's also a lot easier to get to that point where it feels like you can try something out without having to have 4 copies of everything.
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Another point, an LCG player, I will say this, I think, 100% truth. There's no one buying into the LCG format who is looking to make any money, right? Can we just say that 100%? I mean, like,
I'm pretty confident.
Pretty confident that nobody here is speculating on LCGs or going after these cash prizes, etc. I don't think that's happening in the LCG format. CCG format, of course, tournaments, whether they're cash prizes or not, is irrelevant to this discussion. But because there is this value and this randomness going on,
could be speculation.
There are people there who might not be interested in playing the game at all.
Yep.
Right, and that's just a reality that we talked about, that we have to, and that can turn a game sideways, depending on the community and the way that things happen, and how companies deal with distribution and production, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
That can be a thing if you just have people sitting on product and speculating. So that won't happen with an LCG.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like with baseball cards, where like if people are speculating on like Awakening's Vader, scooping them up and buying them all, and you can't get them, it's like that can be frustrating.
Absolutely. But on the other side, if you're looking to get out of the game,
or
if you're looking, if you, I mean, technically it's kind of like buying a house versus renting. Like if I'm renting, that rent check is never coming back.
It's like an LCG.
I get it. Yeah, it's like they'll take care of the pipes. They'll give me 3 of every card, but I'm still renting, and that money's going nowhere. Technically, you aren't investing in a collectible game that you can technically, potentially, maybe make your money back, make some money, or make a little bit less than you spent.
I think we haven't touched on this at all, but on the list for CCG, I think the most important thing, the best.
We haven't touched on the most important.
No, I absolutely think that the literal reason that makes a collectible card game in particular. You have something like Destiny, I think, with the dice, which just maybe from a production standpoint has to be this way, distributed this way. The number one reason that CCGs are in my mind, just an awesome format, sealed and draft.
There we go.
I think sealed and draft is 100%, if you look at like Magic the Gathering, is the reason that game is anywhere near as successful as it's ever been, because you can pay $15, $20. You don't have to own any cards whatsoever.
Yeah.
You can show up, you can play, and then after you're done playing, you have acquired things that you can either keep and add to your collection and for more playing, or that you can probably trade or sell immediately on the spot and get your money back. And so this is a phenomenal tool for getting new people into the game, for getting everyone on the same level where you don't have these insane, crazy combo decks. And honestly, it's just, when I look at like Pokemon, or I look at Magic, or I look at any of these games, the most fun version of these games has always to me been limited.
That's fascinating, because you're such a constructed
I love
kind
that
of brain,
too.
right? You like to build the machine.
Even just watching the Destiny drafts last night happen in the store, it's like they're playing this game on the like fundamental base level.
It's always fundies with limited.
That you played when you first picked up the game. And so I don't always want to do that. I do love getting to the depths of these games and like that kind of thing. But at the same time, seeing R2-D2 on the board, amazing.
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace because you do get cards that you might not see in constructed decks come down on the table, and you don't always see the same matchups because you don't know exactly what's in your opponent's deck because like there's not a meta for a sealed or a draft event necessarily.
And you just get forced into using cards that you wouldn't have used.
Exactly, and so you have to be very opportunistic. You have to start responding to the situation a little bit more. It's a very skill-intensive format. Sometimes you can just kind of net deck, and then, you know, at a certain point you're just like, well, you probably never would have come up with that deck yourself, but now you're beating me with it. I'm so frustrated. I came up with my deck myself and it sucks, but so be it. But yeah, there's something really exciting about just kind of being able to like return to, as you were saying, like the original experience of like bringing out the starter for the game and just trying to like see what's going on and what's going to happen.
Question. This one's for Zach, not necessarily Lucas.
Get out of here.
But why is it that the draft packs for the LCG format never took off for our group, at least?
I think
you can also answer. I have a feeling you might not be interested in saying, yes, here's they failed or didn't for this reason.
I guess it depends on your group because, like, you know, obviously around the game center, like we did a lot of drafting.
You did a lot of drafting.
Well, but
I think the reason that it didn't or isn't like there's a couple reasons. I think number one is tied to what I said, which is when you do a sealed or draft for a collectible game, you inherently have things that are valuable, like they're worth something. Whereas when you like do a draft for Game of Thrones, the people that do play the game already have all those cards, and then there's nothing different about the cards.
There's nothing to do with them afterwards.
There's just nothing to do. So it's effectively you're paying, you know, $15-20 just for the draft experience. When you're paying $20 for the draft experience and then also cards that you wanted to buy anyway, or cards that you can sell to get the thing back or trade for the thing you do want, the value proposition is just very strong.
That's pretty much all that there is to it, I think.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense for me. Limited. All right, what are there? Anything else? We're about out of time here.
I think the CCGs also get the just when you're talking about the release pacing of these things, LCGs are easy to keep up with and easy to maintain, but at the same time, that's also what makes CCGs so exciting.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the big drops of cards.
That feeling of I can't keep up with this because all of these cards just came out.
Well, the feeling of like there's space to explore.
Yeah.
Like right now with Spirit of Rebellion, I feel like there are character combinations and cards out there that need to be explored. When a new pack of Star Wars LCG comes out, I look at the objective sets, and then all of a sudden it's like, this one's worth playing, and it should go in this deck. These three aren't yet. They need more things, or they go here.
And that's it.
Kind of end of story.
Yeah, we've done it.
So I think that's the two sides of that equation, where it's like one is like easier to keep up with and maintain, especially if you don't have that much time to dive.
Absolutely.
The other one provides you a lot more. I was actually talking to you about this, which was, for me, having a collectible Star Wars game.
Yeah.
It's like I'm so happy to have. I'm willing to spend the money to have that much room to dive into in this one game.
Yeah. Yeah, and you were not worried about that at all.
I mean, I think that is something that is interesting as well, is just like the amount of cards that are released over the course of the year. So like for a living card game, like if you don't want to have to spend as much time diving into all of the deck combinations and builds, like say you have 2 cycles come out a year, that's only 240 cards. So you have like 3 Destiny sets come out a year, that's 480 cards. That's double. So like you get twice as many cards to mess around with and play with. And so if you really do want that more hardcore, I want to explore all the options sort of experience, like a collectible game is very good for that. But if you want more of a, I just want to play the game, I like playing the game, I want to keep up with the game, I want my decks to evolve over time, then like a living card game is very good for that as well.
Yeah, it's like you're constantly sharpening your decks just a little bit at a time with an LCG.
Right, and then every once in a while a pack comes out and it really shifts things, but they shift things more early in the experience, like when they make up a larger percentage of the card pool versus later. And so Spirit of Rebellion doubled the card pool for Destiny, and so it feels momentous. The Empire at War will not quite double the card pool, so it won't feel right. It'll be 50% more, so it won't be quite as momentous, but it'll still feel like a huge influx of cards.
But then
to mess around with.
At some point, I assume you'll have the rotation hitting.
Right, and then it can.
And then you have a new set combined with old sets going away. I know with Magic, that's just a huge moment, right? Where it's like you lose a year and you gain a set.
Right. Not only are you adding things in, you're also taking them away.
Yeah. Which can be just
sometimes that's just as important.
Yeah. I remember my last example in that case. I remember one of the Star Wars LCG players locally, like 4 or 5 packs into the first cycle, I was like, man, I just feel like I need more cards. Like, and he's like, man, I feel like packs are coming out too fast. And I was just like,
Right.
what do you mean? It's like there's very different formats for very different people.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, it is worth mentioning the LCG format. That's a phenomenal addition to the family, I would say, because there's the number of people who would not be interested in collectible games as compared to those that are playing the LCG is just massive.
Yeah, because I mean, you get to experience a card game without basically any of the downsides of a collectible. And you know, if you're not into the upsides of the collectible offers, then like those downsides aren't worth it. It's all down, right?
It's all
like
down.
It's no good. All right, well there you go. CCGs and LCGs.
CCGs and LCGs, a beautiful pairing, really.
It's really cool to watch it evolve.
And perhaps maybe somewhere in the middle there's some more things to explore. I've thought about it.
You have to think
I've thought about like, what if you release a pack of 20 identities in Netrunner, like tomorrow?
Changes the game.
You could do that.
Or just a pack of 20. Just a pack of 20 agendas.
I don't want to do that.
Right?
Yeah, 20 agendas. Or just like
do it by card type.
Or like
big
400 objective sets.
Just big changes.
Just need all the cards. All right, let's read some answers from a question we asked an episode or two ago. I think it was episode 8. What makes a game the most fun for you? I'll hit the first one. We have Matt Phillips, and this is not the local Matt Phillips. This is
this is other Matt Phillips.
Other Matt Phillips, who I think
perhaps better. I mean, we don't know.
It's a notable name because we have a local name, Matt Phillips, and this Matt comments on the YouTube a lot. So thank you for the comments. He says, personally, I've found, especially in recent years, a solid team game has been really enjoyable. 2v2 in particular. If I can have the camaraderie of a shared victory or defeat while also enjoying the competitive element, I tend to leave the game with a smile and many laughs on both sides of the table. These games also tend to lead to interesting rivalries where teammates can be switched up so that the camaraderie is spread throughout the gaming group across multiple team-ups.
Fascinating. Are we getting multiplayer for Destiny or what?
I mean, you have multiplayer.
We have the open.
You have the free-for-all. And I did actually play a team game last week. Just for fun. And so we did 2v2.
Yeah.
It was for fun. We did 2v2. I mean, I'd love to make a more official format for it at some point, but I think that there's a lot of interesting opportunities there that I would want to explore.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to just like put out the first thing that comes to mind.
Sure.
But I didn't really change up hardly any rules other than you probably don't want to share the same unique characters with your teammate. You want to sit across from your teammate, so on and so forth. But it was just really interesting, because you can already give shields to everybody at the table. You can already damage everybody at the table. It works very well. And there was kind of a natural progression of I'm going to take out Darth Vader over here because he's really important. But then I'm gonna leave your other character because now there's another threat on the other side of the table that's more important than your character. So everybody kind of stayed in the game until the end.
That's perfect.
And, it was actually really fun. So I'd say right now if you do have 4 people around, try out a 2v2 mode for Destiny.
See how it works.
Yeah.
I think that's so they had 2v2 in Star Wars LCG, and that was my favorite version of that game, period. What it also did, I can imagine in Destiny, it makes a lot of cards that don't seem as good in 1v1 actually playable. I'm thinking about when a character is defeated, do a damage to a character. Is that Aftermath?
Aftermath, all right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's when there's twice as many characters on the board, that gets
way better.
More interesting.
It's way better.
So
let's go to answer 2 from Sal V on YouTube. What makes a game the most fun for you, Sal? Well, one of my group's greatest joys in playing games is unfolding a narrative that we can all contribute to in some way. D&D gives us the most fun because of this, but even miniatures games like Shadow War or X-Wing have become part of our storytelling by those narrow arc misses, or a warband, ambush, etc., etc. This harkens back to Jonathan's comment on a past video about how the dice can create the narrative in a game. This is something that drives our gaming group, and I find that we look for this in games more and more. We rarely remember who won or lost, but more the epic moments created by those pivotal random dice rolls and how that made a memorable story to the mission. This is a big part of our gaming fun. So just remember that the next time you're rolling those Destiny dice and they come up blank, that it's just a beautiful story.
Or the X-Wing dice.
Yeah.
There's nothing like quad blanks on a defense roll.
Great answer from Sal. And that's, I think, a vast majority of people, and I would be willing to say that if we actually did it right, this might be the way to get the most people into tabletop gaming as possible. If you can do the unfolding narrative in a way that just brings people in and is accessible, which is more and more happening, it's great. People love it.
When it becomes about something more than just winning or losing.
Yeah.
When there's something else happening, it's really cool.
It's like real life.
All right, on to questions where we answer your questions. You can use the hashtag AskCovenant, and your question might be featured right here on the show. So first question is
to our
mainly
very own
for
Lukas
Lucas.
Litt.
We asked this on episode 10, but we had to ask you, what's your favorite tournament moment? And don't say me losing.
That was a pretty good moment, I'm not going to lie. Watching Zach kind of draw up into no upgrades in the top 4 of
You
the
didn't
Star
want
Wars
to. You didn't want to
Worlds.
see the old low upgrade deck do something at Worlds.
I mean, hey, it did something. You got top 4. Congratulations for that. That was excellent.
Yeah, that's
No,
right.
it was a good deck, but I guess that's the downsides of running 8 upgrades sometimes is you just don't draw them when you need them. But that wasn't quite my favorite tournament. It's up
Good.
there, but that's not
All right,
quite
I'm
my
glad
favorite
that at least
tournament.
honorable mention.
That's right. Maybe an honorable mention. Yeah, we'll give it that. Man, I mean, there's been a lot of tournament moments. Sometimes the downside of judging is like you don't actually really get to like see games all the way through. So like now that I've been doing some commentating, like last year with Netrunner and this year with Destiny and whatnot, like you actually see more games all the way through and you can kind of appreciate them. And there's some really, really good play that goes on at any tournament. But I think one of my favorite moments is probably Netrunner 20, it might have been 2014 Worlds, where Min Tran was taking his Jinteki like Mushin no Notion deck up against Dan Darginio, and they're basically trying to get into the finals. And that game was just like down to the wire, cutthroat. Like, you know, you just have the cards sitting out on the table with like 3 counters on it. Like, is it going to be like a Junebug? Is it an agenda? And like Dan's just like sitting there like just sweating and like, oh my God, like I can't believe like Min just keeps doing it over and over again, and he has like an expressionless face, like you know you just can't read him at all, like you just have no idea what he's doing. And then that game came down to basically a run where you know like Dan had just the one credit he needed to break through and like steal the last agenda, which happens all the time in Netrunner.
It does.
It's really, really awesome.
Amazing.
And so had a great climactic finish to like just a really intense game all the way through. But I also just love watching kind of players, you know, bring something exciting to the table and seeing, you know, kind of like your deck, something a little bit off meta, or like Daniel Weiser's deck at Star Wars Worlds, where it's like, yes, Vader Raider won, but like this is a different sort of Vader Raider deck. Like this ran a lot of cheap cards in it, and it didn't have the normal cards that you'd expect, or like the Leia Akbar deck that made top 16 at Worlds. Like that was really fun to watch as well.
Yeah.
Sadly, you had to blow it out of the water in the top 16. But,
Whoops.
but you know, it was
It
really exciting to
had
see
to be
that
one
on
of
stream.
us. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, as a designer, like just to further that, it's like, is it cool to see these moments created from things you've made? Like
It is cool.
to
I
see
mean,
these
at a
things.
certain point, like it doesn't really register as that anymore. Like you just kind of accept it as a thing, and you don't really even necessarily think like I made this. You just are very intimately familiar with it, and it just seems like a normal thing to you to just watch this stuff play out.
Cool.
It's fascinating.
But yeah, tournaments are a lot of fun, and I think I do miss playing in tournaments a little bit. Like I kind of that was always like the test of a deck is like when you could take a deck that you made and then do really well in a tournament with it. And so like I'm always excited for people who kind of bring things that you don't expect and then do well in the tournament, because that's what I like to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you get to see that a
Very
lot.
similar.
You do, yeah.
That's very cool.
All right, well, let's go to the next one. We got an awesome comment a pretty long time ago from Garnet B on YouTube. And it was basically in response to, I think it was our advice for somebody looking to open a tabletop gaming store. And one of the things being, or doing much of anything really, it relates to everything, is that, you know, don't listen to the naysayers. Don't succumb to all the negativity. There's always going to be people in your life who are saying you can't do X, you can't do Y, you can't do Z. Especially on ye old internet now. It's, you know, everyone is a keyboard away from taking someone else's dreams away. And it basically said, I really appreciate the advice of just, you know, trust in yourself, move forward on the path that you like, take feedback, but move forward on the path that you think is correct, even if people are disagreeing and saying it'll never work, right? Especially in relation to our store. So his question, and this is a deep question, so I don't know if anybody is actually prepared for an answer. But essentially, do you guys have an experience that stands out in your mind where you were met with naysaying and then overcame it anyway, or pushed forward anyway, where there was that kind of negative influence, you know, right there behind you, and you said, no, I'm going to move forward with this and I'm going to make it because I believe in it strongly enough? That ever happen to anybody? I'm sure it happens to us all the time. It's the great human drama, but...
Yeah, I mean,
You got something?
Certainly.
Hit me.
I mean, I think Covenant as a entity was one of those things, honestly. Like, when I was a kid, my parents were very, like, anti-D&D Magic, and so that was the thing that was kind of around, even though I was playing Pokemon. And then when I, like, ultimately, for just having no idea what was going on, launching a website and starting to sell stuff online, just everybody was like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? You just do it anyway. And then secondarily, you know, we opened a local store, and I remember the number of people that came in. It was just like, you're not selling Magic,
Yeah, this
or
will never
Pokemon,
work.
or 40K,
It'll
or
never
Yu-Gi-Oh.
work.
It's like, no way. It's like, you guys are going to be closed in 6 months. And 5 years later, it's still going on.
We
So
made it out so far.
So that's really
yeah.
cool. But I think that's why we said you got to trust in your, like,
Mm-hmm.
you got to believe in yourself and what you're doing. And, sometimes you're wrong and you fail, but, like, that's part of life. So
Absolutely.
I mean, I think from a game design standpoint, like, you run across this a lot. Like, obviously there are negative comments that come out after you release anything, but even before that, like, a lot of the job when developing something is taking all of these, and they're not like negative in like a bad way, but taking these comments about cards from your playtesters that are disagreeing with each other and saying like, no, you shouldn't print this, or no, you shouldn't print that, or no, I don't like this card, or no, I don't think this card is fun. And then you have to kind of like navigate through those and come up with something that you think is best for the game. And it is true, like at the end of the day, like the best way to figure it out is like just keep playing it yourself and, kind of follow your designer's intuition, and then also weigh that against what everybody else is saying and see where that leads you. Because like sometimes you'll be wrong, but sometimes other people will be wrong, and sometimes like not everybody can be right at the same time.
Sure.
And so like that's definitely one of the challenges, is like trying to figure out, who to actually listen to and when to not listen to yourself, because sometimes you do have to decide like, I'm the anomaly here, like it might just be me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've got two examples. I'm choosing from one right now in my head, but a more personal example that is tangentially related to Covenant, just because that's been such a part of our life. But I remember there was a certain person who I will not name in my life, and there was a very specific moment where I had just started. I was the first employee, the first full-time, and I was working from home. And that entailed keeping all the inventory in the bedroom, and then biking to the post office every day.
Yeah, keep it in the garage?
Shipping one package. There's no garage.
No garage? Wow.
No, yeah,
There
it was
was a-
tiny.
That's awesome.
Shared with 2 other people so we could split the rent. It was incredibly, awesomely tight living. Like the lowest I've ever paid to exist in my entire life.
check out the Snowpocalypse video.
Yeah,
on
the
our
snow.
YouTube.
Yeah, that snow.
You got a preview of what this would look
Couldn't
like.
even afford a razor. So
I don't
yeah,
think that's true.
so there was this moment that was kind of where my life was, and I had somebody say, "What's going to happen is you're going to keep trying to do this. You're going to keep saying that it's going to work out, and you're going to wake up when you're 40 years old, having never made or done anything with your life."
Someone said that?
Yeah,
Wow.
Nuh-uh.
That's
Yeah.
brutal.
legit.
Wow.
And I said, "Well,
Get
I
bent.
hope you're wrong." And then saw them out of my life, and here we are.
That's
So-
wild.
Are you 40 yet?
No, not 40.
Nowhere
Wow.
near.
Not even close. I'm just 30.
That's right.
Just
we
Well,
got-
you
we got a whole-
10
I've got
years,
10
so-
years for this thing to
That's
crash.
Oh my man, that's intense.
Yeah, these people are out there. You got to watch out for them.
Man. All right. Well,
Just go
that's real.
slacklining and
I'm-
get over it.
That's crazy. I'm kind of floored to hear that. Well, I'm glad you didn't dive off the course personally.
Yeah, well, she's no longer in my life, Zach.
Yes. This is making more sense now. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can use the hashtag AskCovenant. We will answer your questions right here on the show. And if you get the chance, let us know in the comments, what are your favorite aspects of CCGs and LCGs? And until next time, keep playing.